It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222, and your emails as well at randykabc@gmail.com. That's randykabc@gmail.com. I try to read and respond to everything that I get at randykabc@gmail.com. Some of those emails we even read on the air. This is going to be fun. For the first time since I have been broadcasting at home, I am not able to activate the sound computer. I can activate my drops.
Quite frankly.
But the sound computer that I use to play you, whether it is sound from our elected officials, whether it's a press conference or a news story, for some reason I can send it over the air, but I can't hear it back, and I don't know why that's happening. And of course, I realized this about 2 minutes before the show, so we're going to call an audible today, and we're going to discuss something that I wasn't planning on discussing because I had a whole show ready to go talking about all of the politicians going all the way in on Measure A. But that's not going to happen today. So instead, we're going to go with some of the other late-breaking news that has been going on today. There has been a lot of talk surrounding the fact that the Los Angeles Times and their owner, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, told the editorial board they were not allowed to endorse Kamala Harris. It's the most bizarre story because if they made that endorsement, it would not have changed anything. No one would have even paid attention. It would not make the news. But what happened was, apparently, the LA Times editorial board, as they were going to, they endorsed Adam Schiff, they endorsed George Gascon, they said no on 36. They made editorial decisions on everything up and down the ballot, especially locally, yes on Measure A. But when it came to the presidential election, the owner of the LA Times, who is a pharmaceutical guy who bought the paper, 5-6 years ago now, he told the editorial board, no, you will not be doing this. And just a few minutes ago, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, responding to the fact that one of the head editorial editors on the paper resigned this afternoon because of this decision, well, he is speaking out on Twitter. I don't call it X. Nobody calls it X. But here's what he had to say. So many comments about the LA Times editorial board not providing a presidential endorsement this year. Let me clarify how this decision came about. The editorial board was provided the opportunity to draft a factual analysis of all the positive and negative policies by each candidate during their tenures at the White House, how these policies affected the nation. In addition, the board was asked to provide their understanding of the policies and plans enunciated by the candidates during this campaign and its potential effect on the nation in the next 4 years. In this way, with clear and nonpartisan information side by side, our readers could decide who would be worthy of being president for the next 4 years. Instead of adopting this path as suggested, the editorial board chose to remain silent, and I accepted their decision. Please #vote. This story has a whole bunch of people blowing up at each other on all sides, and it is really fascinating to watch because I'm somebody that happens to be in the news business and can proudly say that I haven't used the Los Angeles Times for show prep in over 4 years. And it's not something that they wrote that just completely offended me. It was simply, well, it was two things. One, it's the paywall, and I didn't feel like paying for a service that I was barely using. But the LA Times doesn't break a whole lot of stories these days. The LA Times isn't really a place you go to for news. So if you're just going there for opinions, you know what those opinions are going to be. It is interesting that the opinion section wasn't allowed to give an opinion on the presidential race, but who knows what's going on with that. What I know is that the Los Angeles Times is no longer a paper that breaks news the way it used to. Look at the story we did yesterday with Andy Doe in Orange County. That story was broken by public radio and the KPCC people before the feds got involved. Where was the LA Times on that? On some of the hugest scandals, Mark Ridley Thomas, so many things that have happened. Where was the Los Angeles Times? I don't think they've been relevant since the Bell scandal, and that goes all the way back to 2010. I know, because I worked at KFI at the time. So I can proudly say I don't use it. Now, I'm somebody that's marinated in local news. I'm marinated in the news business, but I think I consume news in a very different way than probably most people because I'm just not the best reader. I get distracted very easily. Maybe it's ADD, who knows? But I consume, and maybe it's because I've been a radio listener my entire life, I'm able to consume most of the information that I get in my life through audio. And what I have found that has really worked for me, especially when doing show prep for 2 shows on live radio every single day, is simply that I have a system where I am subscribed to a ridiculous amount of YouTube channels. I don't even think I can count because every local news station has a YouTube channel. Most politicians, most government agencies have a YouTube channel. The LA City Council posts all of their meetings on YouTube. So every single day, the way I'm informed about what's going on is I get up early in the morning. I start going through ABC 7. What's the story on there? And then I flag all the ones that I think might be interesting, might be something I want to hear about, it might be something you want to hear about, and then I save it. I save it in my Watch Later playlist. Then I go through ABC 7 Bay Area, ABC 30 in the Central Valley, and so on and so on and so on, whether it's the local elected pages, whether it's the government pages, everything. And then that's what I listen to in my hour-plus long commute every day until I can't take it anymore. And then I go switch to a Conan O'Brien podcast, is I listen to as many local reports. I think the local television stations and the local radio stations in this city do a very good job. LA Times has not been a place where I get my news for a long time. I don't think they're relevant. I don't think their editorial page means much. And seeing all this infighting is just kind of makes you giggle because I don't think this paper is nearly as influential as they think they are. Here's what I'd like to do just as an experiment, because you're a very specific audience. This audience consumes news. This audience is informed and up to date on the issues, is up to date on what's going on in their community. What I want to know is specifically, where do you get your news these days? Is it the LA Times? Is it one of the smaller papers like the Southern California News Group? Do you not use the papers at all? Do you get all your information from radio? Do you get it all from television? Where do you get your news? Where, especially local stuff. I don't really care about what's going on nationally because who knows what's going on nationally and how much of it affects us. But where in this day and age do you go to get your local news? Are you getting it all from this station? Do you listen to a multitude of stations? Do you have local papers? Maybe it's some of the local blogs. We featured a few of them on the show, like Two Urban Girls or the West Side Current. But is anybody out there actually reading the LA Times for news? I'd love to know. 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. I'm going to need your calls today because the sound computer ain't working, but I'd love to talk to you. 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. Do you get your news from the LA Times? If you don't, where do you get your news? Where do you get your local news about Southern California, about Los Angeles? Maybe there's a news source that I don't know about that I should be paying attention to. Do you get 100% of your news from me? I sure hope not. 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. That's the question I want to talk to you about. Tell me, as we see all this infighting going on with the owner of the LA Times going to war with the editorial board, we're seeing resignations happening. Do you even get your news from there? When's the last time you read the LA Times? Tell me all about it. 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. To break a little early here, it's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. We're taking your phone calls at 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. By the way, I did fix my computer during the break, which it was getting a little panicky there. It's my security blanket because I know I've always got my sound in case I need it. But it turned into an interesting topic because there's a lot of turmoil going on with the LA Times. In fact, over 400 subscribers canceled their subscription in the last 24 hours because of the decision of the owner of the LA Times to refuse and not let the editorial board endorse Kamala Harris for president for a whole bunch of reasons. Who knows what's the actual truth there? But I think it leads to a larger conversation of how irrelevant that paper is. So what I actually want to know is from this audience, an audience that actively consumes news, where are you getting your news? Are you getting it all from this radio station? Do you get it from a couple of different radio stations? Are there smaller papers that you subscribe to? Do you subscribe to the LA Times? Do you get it from the internet? God forbid, do you get it from social media? Where are you getting your news these days? That's what I want to know from you. 800-222-KABC. 1-800-222-5222. I told you I get 100% of my news and I would say my show prep material from all the YouTube channels that I subscribe to, which are made up of local news channels throughout the state of California, Southern California market, the Northern California market, the Central Valley, Sacramento, and then every politician that might be relevant. I follow all of them. But I want to know how you're getting your news these days. 800-222-KABC. Let's start with Dale in Culver City. Dale, hello.
Hey, Randy, you know what? Not to sound like a butt kisser, but I like listening to you at 5 o'clock because I'm on the freeway for an hour from 5 to 6 every day. And then I like you and Johnny at noon. And absolutely my favorite is Dan Bongino, also on KABC. Channel 5 News, I listen to those guys in the morning for the weather. Vera Wang's my favorite weather girl. And then Larry Elder sometimes at night, too. So. And then, of course, Fox.
Oh, you got a full day packed in. You're consuming all day long.
Well, I kind of drive around a lot doing. Anyway, I don't want to talk about what I do at work because I'm at Culver City.
Yeah, well, that sounds like you're pretty informed all day long, Dale. We're so glad to have you.
I'm glad to be here and always glad to listen to you, Randy.
So glad to have you. Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. Didn't realize that this topic had turned into a whole bunch of people calling in saying, we get all our news from you. But this is where we are. I am legitimately curious where you're getting your news these days, especially local news. 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. And you know, you don't have to play favorites. There's plenty of people that flip all around the dial. But if you get all of it from us and you're a P1, which means you only listen to this station, well, thank you. I feel so special. Let's go to Leslie in South Orange County. Leslie, hello.
Hey, Randy. So I'm in my mid-50s, and I grew up with my parents reading the LA Times every day. So I used to do that as well. Now I can't stand that paper, but I do subscribe to the Orange County Register down here in South Orange County.
That's a great paper.
Yeah, it's not bad. And then I listen to, of course, you all, and I do KFI sometimes in the morning. What I won't do is I will not turn on the news at night. The local KABC, CBS, all those, they're just so either fluff or way too left for me.
See, what I like about the fact that I follow all those local news channels on just YouTube is I can literally pick the stories that interest me and not have to sit through all the stories that might be the fluff ones that I just do not care about.
Yeah, I can't do it. I can't do it. So I enjoy reading the paper. It's a nice pastime. My kids get driven crazy when I always have on talk radio in the car.
Hey, you know what? I was one of those kids that was annoyed by my parents that talk radio all day long in the car. And then I got so hooked on it that became my livelihood.
Yeah, see?
There you go. Thanks so much for the call, Leslie. Appreciate it. I very distinctly remember My parents always having on only in the bathroom KFWB News 98. So while you're showering, you hear, we give you us 22 minutes, we'll give you the world. But in the car, it was always KFI with my mom listening to Dr. Laura or Phil Hendry. And as a 7-year-old, not understanding what the bit was with Phil Hendry, I very distinctly remember listening to that. I very distinctly remember listening to some guy on the radio complaining that he had this caller that he couldn't get off the air that kept telling him how much his show sucked. That stuck with me. And then my dad, he would listen to Stern. And then when KLSX flipped to All Talk, he would listen to, Tom Likas and that whole crew. And let's just say I'm marinated in talk radio. And I'm a product of LA talk radio. How about that? Let's go to Alpian in La Puente. Alpian, hello.
Hello, Randy.
Hey.
Hi, Randy. I really appreciate your show, and I'm really grateful that I found KABC. I used to listen to the AM 1070 to get my local, not knowing there's been KABC. So I'm really grateful that I found KABC and your show.
Well, we're so glad to have you. Nothing against KNX. They do it very straight. They do it very down the line. But if you listen to radio for a really long time, the news radio format, like KNX, they repeat themselves every 30 minutes. So you've heard everything if you've listened to it for a half hour. We try to, my whole thing is I'm trying to entertain and educate at the same time.
Yeah, you're right about some about KNX, but many other of their things are too left, so I cannot stand already. And also from the TV, the TV broadcast are too left already. So tired of those shows.
Yeah, so none of that for you. It's all talk radio for you.
Yeah.
Well, we're so glad to have you, Alpian. Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it. 800-222-KABC is the phone number, as the LA Times is actively bleeding subscribers over the latest editorial fight between the owner and the board over him not letting them endorse Kamala Harris. I'm very curious where you're getting your news these days. Is there a paper you subscribe to? Do you read the LA Times? Do you get it all from talk radio? Do you watch the local TV stations? How are you consuming your local news in Southern California? If you're getting it all from us, that's great too. 800-222-KABC. ABC, 1-800-222-5222. Let's go to Sylvia in Gardena. Sylvia, hello.
Hi. I think I'm an anomaly. I'm not your usual listener. I started listening to you back in 2016 because I'm on the more liberal side, and I thought I need to hear the conservative side. So I love the LA Times. It's a heartache to see what they're going through. I am a big believer in journalism, print journalism. I subscribe to the LA Times, the Daily Breeze, which is more conservative. I listen to you guys on my dial at 640, 790. Is that who you guys are? And 870
yeah, we're 790
to get the. You're okay, and then 870 to get like the opposite viewpoint, and then TV news. It's strictly CNN. But I'm really heartbroken. Yeah, I'm really heartbroken about the LA Times. I grew up on it. It's what I read back in the Manson murder days. My parents subscribed to it. And I just think print journalism is so necessary to have an informed citizenry. So, it breaks my heart that they're going through.
I think you're totally right about that, and I wish we had more of it. I feel like these corruption scandals would get uncovered so much quicker, or they wouldn't happen at all if we had so much more in-foot present local journalism. I mean, how many city councils are there that don't have any local journalists covering what's going on in the 88 cities of Los Angeles or all the cities in the other surrounding counties? And you look at somebody who's taken over the paper, a billionaire like Patrick Soon-Shiong, who has decimated the newsroom in there, and now he's going after the editorial board.
It's just so sad. Yeah, it's just so sad. And when he bought the paper a few years back, I had such high hopes because I know what were they owned by the Tribune at that time, and they were having such a difficult time financially. And I thought, he'd be a savior for them.
It's a really interesting time to be in the world of journalism, especially print, because you're going to lose money. It's very difficult for any of these papers to turn a profit. But at the same time, it's such a necessary thing that's why there's this talk of having, you're having these big tech companies like Google start giving money to local journalism because they make all their money off of the back of local journalism. It's a really interesting time in journalism.
Yeah. So, I feel, like I said, I think I'm an anomaly compared to most of your listenership, but I do want to hear different viewpoints. And so I make a point of listening to other stations.
Well, I do that too, and I really appreciate that you say that, and I love that. And I consider myself a very middle of the road person, and I listen to viewpoints on all sides, and then I make my informed decision. And I love that you do that, and I love that we're a part of your listening schedule. And we're so glad to have you, Sylvia.
And you know what? You're more sane. Some of them are so insane and so intense. It's like if they were in person, they would be like spitting at you. They're just like so volatile. So I do appreciate that you are much more courteous and measured in your speaking.
Well, I do appreciate that. Ultimately, for me, I'd rather get a laugh out of somebody than get a rise out of them, because I don't. The anger stuff can only play for so long, and I'm here to have fun, learn a little bit, but at the most point, I just like to make people giggle.
And you do. I appreciate that.
Well, thanks so much for the call, Sylvia. Have a great day.
You too. Thank you.
Oh, this is turning into a pretty interesting topic. I'm very curious because you are the audience. You are a news-consuming audience. Obviously, you listen to this station, and we're so glad that you do, but I'm sure you consume a whole bunch of other content, whether it's print, whether it's online, whether it's TV, radio. As the LA Times is going through this turmoil, I'd love to know where you're getting your local news right now. 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. We'll take more of your calls next. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It is the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. We're here every single day from 5 to 6 talking about the local issues that matter to you most and taking your phone calls with 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. Your emails as well at randykabc@gmail.com. That's randykabc@gmail.com. There's a big upheaval at the LA Times in the last 48 hours after the owner, Dr. Patrick Soon-Shiong, forbade his editorial board from endorsing Kamala Harris for president for reasons unknown. He posted something on Twitter that tried to explain it. I'm even more confused. The editorial board editor quit today over it. 400 subscribers have quit in the last 24 hours. And it's just got me wondering how relevant this paper is anymore. So I want to know, as a news consuming audience, where do you get your news? Where are you getting all of your news, especially local news? Do you get it all from AM Talk Radio? Do you get it from different websites? Do you subscribe to some of the smaller newspapers? How are you staying informed in this ever diversifying media culture? 800-222-KABC. Let's go to Tom in Santa Monica. Tom, hello.
Randy, how you doing?
Doing great.
I get my news usually from 6 to 9. I get it on 870 AM, and then from 12 to 3, that's a no-brainer, you and John, and then I listen to you every day. It's really great. And I just want to say that I used to be subscribed to the LA Times from like late 70s, early 80s, all the way to like 2006 or 2007. And the reason I quit, the reason I loved it was Jim Murray. He was a great editorial guy in the sports section. But the reason I stopped it is I think it was around Black Lives Matter, and I noticed that every time they mentioned the word black, had nothing to do with whether it was a person. They always used a capital B. And I hope I'm not the only one that really thinks of this. But it's a capital B, and I thought to myself, why would it be a B? When it says white, it's not a capital W. When it says A, it's not a capital. It's not Asian. And that, and I canceled after like 30 years.
Wow! So you were done.
Oh yeah, I mean the main reason I got it was Jim Murray and the crossword puzzle. But anyhow, I thought it was an all right paper. And growing up in Maryland, they're left wing over there as well. But in '80, when I started with Al Rantel, that turned into McIntyre in the morning, and then you got the sports princess who used to do the sports there, and now you're with him, and I never changed.
Well, we're so glad to have you. I think we're coming up on, I think Johnny's been with the station for about 20 years, and I've been with this station for 11 now.
Well, what's really great about it, especially you guys 12 to 3, you combine, it's almost like, I don't want to say Johnny Carson, but you combine some comedy, some entertainment with facts. It's like right there. So people want to listen to you. I don't know.
Well, I really appreciate that. That is exactly what we set out to do. I want to make people laugh, and if they can learn something and maybe get informed at the same time, that's a win-win.
Yeah, and your show 5 to 6 is great. Congratulations.
Well, thank you so much, Tom. I really appreciate it. You know what? My head's going to be so big, I'm not going to be able to walk out of this room at the end of this hour. But hey, I'm really curious, as we're in a very interesting, diversified media atmosphere, as the LA Times is going through this upheaval, where are you consuming your news? Is it all talk radio? Do you go online? Is it social media? Or are there different news websites? Are there blogs? How are you consuming, especially your local news these days? 800-222-KABC. Let's go to Belinda in LA. Belinda, hello.
Hi there. I get my news off of Twitter and talk radio. And I used to read the LA Times, honestly, for maybe 30, 35 years. And as soon as they removed the sports section, my dad was so pissed. He was so angry, he canceled a subscription. And because of that as well, my dad was such a loyal subscriber. He read that's how my dad learned English. That's how I learned English, through the LA Times. And when they removed the sports section, that gutted my dad's heart. So I stopped reading them. So now it's just Twitter. Yeah. And if it's like KABC 7 or Talk Radio, then I'll click on the link and there you go.
Wow. So that's great. That's the way you find us. I love that. I have heard so many people, that was the last part of the paper they really enjoyed, including Johnny, was that sports section, and them decimating that department made no sense.
Nope. And I called screaming at them because I was so upset for my dad, and they offered to maybe renew my subscription and knock a couple bucks off.
Yeah, that's not going to do it. Well, Belinda, I'm so glad you found us. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for the call. Appreciate it. 800-222-KABC is the phone number, 1-800-222-5222. How are you getting your local news these days? Is it all from talk radio? Is it the internet? Do you subscribe to the LA Times or one of the other papers? I'd love to know. 800-222-KABC, 1-800-222-5222. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. We're taking your phone calls on where you're getting your local news these days, as there's all this upheaval at the LA Times. How relevant is that paper anymore? Let's go to Simon in Westwood. Simon, hello.
Hi.
Simon.
Yes, hold on here. Can you guys hear me? Yeah, hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're on the air.
Okay, hey, all right, what's up? Yeah, where did I get my news? Well, there's one source called the Epoch Times. You know, it's no longer what the LA Times used to be at one time, you know, or even that of the Herald Examiner back in the day. But, I mean, the only time I would used to, you know, get the newspapers because, you know, the sports page and stuff like that. But then I wasn't really into politics. So let's put it this way. As far as the Epoch Times, yeah, I get it from there. And, of course, the other station, I don't know if I can say this or not, was InfoWars, you know. So as far as the newspaper, the LA Times,
you like InfoWars.
Well, I mean, I get my source from there, but what started this all was the Epoch Times, believe it or not. You know, because they're more, how can I say, they're not sellouts. They don't cater to the, how can I say this, to the Democratic side. So pretty much it's one of those things where they tell the truth and they expose what it is. Like I said, you can still get the newspaper, but then when and thank God for you guys, you know, I mean, all of a sudden I didn't even know that KBC still existed. Because I used to be one of those people when I was a teenager back in the day, which I was like about, 18. My boss used to put on KBC Michael Jackson, the English guy. And, of course, you had Ken and Bob, you know. So now I'm 62 now. So, like I said, back then I didn't really care anything about what's going on. But now it's just too obvious. So that's where I get my sources from is, like I said, Epoch Times and InfoWars. And then, of course, you guys, you know, I mean, you guys help me through the day. I'm a UPS driver. So I'm out here, you know, listening to you guys. And it's fascinating stuff that you guys always, you know, have on your radio. So, yeah, there you go.
Well, we're so glad to be part of the mix, Simon. Thank you so much for not only listening, but delivering those packages, because we need you. Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it. More of your calls coming up next. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on KABC. Let me do this before I forget. 790 KABC welcomes Jeff Lynn's ELO, the Over and Out Tour 2024. And I heard that he is actually hanging it up next year. So this year, one of your last chances to ever see him at the Kia Forum on October 26th. Tickets are on sale now at Ticketmaster.com. But right now, call in number 9 at 1-888-790-5222. Gets a pair of tickets to the show. Tickets furnished by Live Nation. Good luck dialing. We've got about 5 minutes left here. So I'm going to try to get to everyone who's on hold. Let's try to go maybe 30 seconds at the most so we can get to as many people as possible. Let's go to Chris in Torrance. Chris, hello.
Hi.
Hey.
I listen to Alex Jones as well, Band.video, NPR, KNX. I go on Rumble, Forbes. I kind of listen to everything I can get my hands on these days.
Wow,
Sky
you
News,
go all
Rebel
around.
News. Yeah, I like to have all the sites, and then listen to a lot of the Congress people, check out their pages, go on X, anything I can do to kind of get a well-rounded view of things. But mainly, I think the other listener, InfoWars, they have a huge, Band.video has a lot of different journalists and podcasters that go, and a lot of their pages are on Rumble as well. So you can get a lot of information these days.
Wow, you go for a lot of different sources. That's interesting, Chris. Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it. I didn't know there was a crossover audience between NPR and InfoWars, but we're learning. Let's go to Doug in Toluca Lake. Doug, hello.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. I still take the newspaper that's actually made out of paper. I got two of them. One's the Wall Street Journal, and one is the LA Times. And like I told your screener, for the actual news, I usually go to Wall Street Journal first, and then I have the LA Times in the tradition of The Godfather, because I'm Italian. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So I get
That's great, Doug. Thank you so much for the call. Appreciate it. Let's go to George in Simi Valley. George, hello.
Hi, Randy. I'm still get the paper. It's online now because it's too expensive to get the paper. But every day, every week, I wonder, why am I still getting this thing? What really makes me upset is that you need a major paper to hold Sacramento and LA city government to account, and I don't see them ever lead on any of that stuff. Anytime it actually gets into the paper, I've heard it on You First or some other source. And I think that's just a shame that, to fix California, one big thing you could do is fix the LA Times, but might never happen.
I think you make a really good point. Thanks so much for the call, George. We need a strong, robust local journalism center in Los Angeles to uncover the rampant corruption and incompetency that's out there. And, we can only do what we do, but we don't even have a newsroom. That's why I get all my stuff on YouTube. Let's go to Stan in L.A. Stan, hello.
Hey, Randy, thank you. A long-time listener, first-time caller. I get my news, obviously, from you during my drive back home, and also listen to a lot of Don Bongino on this AM radio, and definitely not listening to LA Times. They're as good as a big old trash can. But basically, just podcasters, independent podcasters will give us a raw news and expose these liberal, woke-minded corruption.
Well, there you go. Thanks so much for the call, Stan. Glad to have you. Call back anytime. Roger writes in at randykbc@gmail.com. I listen to radio, internet, TV, and the police scanner. Penny says, I get my local news from you and Johnny. The national news I get from Larry Elder, Bongino. I even listen to KMJ Fresno for the local and national talk news. That's our sister station. We're actually going to be doing a simulcast with them on election night. Judy says, no, I don't read the LA Times. Never. I get my news from you and John. Sometimes I listen to Bongino. The rest of the radio hosts have annoying voices. I watch the first 5 minutes of local news shows or longer if they're showing a high-speed chase. After 5 minutes, I move on. Sometimes I watch Fox. And Fred says, I wouldn't wrap fish or send over a message to Luca Brasi in that paper. All right, now, someone very special is getting the last word on this topic because he used to work at the LA Times, and I know that because he mentions it every time he calls in. Bill in La Cañada. Bill, hello.
Come on, Randy. I don't mention it every time, but since you mentioned it, yeah, I wrote op-eds, as I've mentioned, on education from 95 to 2000 when they wanted to bash the teachers' unions, and I was happy to do that. The trouble started about 2001. They got purchased by the Tribune Company, and it's been downhill Wokeville ever since. For local news, I read this little thing around here, the La Cañada Outlook Valley Sun, to get all the juicy scandals on the La Cañada School District that the LA Times just ignores.
That's great. Well, Bill, we're always appreciative that you call in here. We love you, buddy. Thanks so much for the call. That was great. Thank you all so much for all the calls. That was so much fun and informative and very interesting to find out what this audience is, how they're consuming their news outside of just what they hear on this radio station. I think that's very, very interesting because it's such a different world than it was even 10 years ago, but definitely 20 years ago. So thank you all so much for being a part of this show every day, especially when I broke my computer right before the show started. So y'all came through. Appreciate that. We'll see you tomorrow at 5 for the topic I was going to do today. It's the News Blitz with Randy Wang on Talk Radio 790 KABC.